Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon again. Welcome to another episode of a webinar here at the Civil Service College. This time we're presenting Building Inclusive Workplaces, Creating Respect, Fairness, and Psychological Safety. My name is Tandai. I'm an account manager here at the Civil Service College, and I'll be your host for the webinar today. A few housekeeping rules on our end. If we can, let's just keep our microphones muted. We can keep our cameras on, it's not a problem at all. And whatever interactive session we're going to have today, can we use our chat box? That's what we'll be using. That's what we'll be monitoring most of the questions, responses, and I'll pick them up from there as well. So a little bit about who we are, if we can, and let's go to the next slide, please. So here's CSC. We focus on understanding your organization's training needs. Our tailor-made approach means that we work with you at every step to create bespoke training courses that meet specific objectives as well as learning requirements for the group. We're a trusted supplier to His Majesty's governmental departments, for example, Home Office, FCDO, as well as the NHS. And we've got 12 series, and some of the 12 series that we offer or deliver leadership and management, communication, as well as personal development. Joining me on the webinar today will be Ian Rose. A little bit about Ian. He's a retired Paralympian medalist, experienced facilitator specializing in leadership resilience, disability awareness, over 20 years worth of experience. But I won't talk too much about Ian because I think I'll leave him something to also share with you lot. But what I would encourage us to do is let's be interactive as much as possible, ask as many questions in the comments box, and let's have a good session. Ian, over to you.
Tendai, thank you. And just a quick confirmation, can you hear me, see me, and see the slides okay still?
Absolutely.
Brilliant. Awesome. Thank you. And welcome everyone on this lovely afternoon. And those guys that are joining us from international, if there are any internationals here, you're probably thinking about these Brits always whinging about the weather, hey? It's either too cold or too hot, you know, so absolutely, we've got to dig in and get on with this, haven't we? So the workshop begins. As Tendai said, we're here to talk about inclusive teams and creating those cultures that we all talk about, and really looking at the detail when it comes to what does an inclusive team mean, and why is it important to you? Here's some of the stuff we're going to be going through on this workshop in particular, and we're going to look at discrimination. We're going to look at the different types of discrimination that we can actually experience in the workplace. I'm going to set you up a little scenario that you're going to read, and we're going to ask for some comments in the chat box. We've even got a poll for you as well, for you to answer in respect to what you think the answer is to this and how we can, you know, make sure this doesn't happen in your area. We're going to look at respect and the differences between equity and equality as well, and why that's important, you know, and why it's important how we build respect, how we build empathy, all those sorts of really, you know, really important things that we need to embed in our teams so that we create that inclusive team, and find out why it's important to you. I'm very much a facilitator, a trainer on not just talking about the why things are important, but how do we do it? You know, exactly how, what sort of tools have we got at our own disposal to make sure that we can create these inclusive teams? And we're going to learn around how to respond effectively to, you know, discrimination and, uncomfortable conversations type stuff. You know, I've done a lot of that sort of stuff in my background as well. So just very briefly, I'm going to talk to you around who I am and what gives me the right to sort of sit here and talk to you about this sort of stuff. As Tendai said, my name's Ian Rose. I am a retired Paralympian, but there's a bit of a story behind that and why inclusion for me and disability in the workplace and all that sort of stuff is really important to me. When I was born back in 1972, yes, I'm 54 for those guys that got their calculators out. I was born in a little place called High Wycombe, just about 20 miles outside London, and I was rushed into Stoke Mandeville Hospital around 6 months old to have some operations. And those operations were to help me with a condition that I had been diagnosed with called retinoblastoma. Now, retinoblastoma is childhood eye cancer. And I needed some operations to, unfortunately, remove my left eye because the cancer had got, and the tumours had got really bad in my left eye, but it also spread to my right eye as well. and they gave me radiotherapy. But the radiotherapy, although it solved and got rid of the tumours, it also left me with an indent down the side of my face, down the right-hand side of my face, and the need to wear these big, thick glasses. Now, when I was younger, that wasn't a problem. But when I was at school, around 7 years old, I started being teased and bullied about the one thing that I couldn't change, the way I looked. And it was horrible. I was going home in tears most afternoons, and my mum and dad knew that something had to change because they knew that I wasn't smiling very much. And the definition of the word success in my parents' eyes, and now in my eyes, excuse me, is to be successful. Firstly, it's not about the money, it's not about big houses, it's not about fast cars. It's about how proud you are of what you've done, what you're doing, and what you're about to do. And that means the big smile on your face. And I had none of that. So they knew that I was suffering with a lack of self-esteem, a lack of self-confidence, and a lack of self-belief. And they were the things that they had to try and help me develop at that very early age through those times of being teased and bullied. So they got me into the sport of judo. Judo is my sport. That's where I went. So I traveled the world for the Paralympics, but my start in judo wasn't an easy one. And this is something that I want to talk to you about my first day in the judo club. Put yourselves in your shoes of your first day at work and think about those nerves you encountered on that first day in that office, thinking, whoa, what are these people going to think of me? Am I going to be able to do this job? Do I want to do this job? Will I be able to keep up with everybody? And they were the things that I was feeling going into this judo club. And initially I didn't really actually want to do my sport. But then my coach Ron turned around and he said, Ian, how do you know if you do or don't like something, or can or can't do something unless you give it a go? And I'm so glad he said that, because after 3 weeks, the teasing I was getting completely stopped. Now, to do that, we as people need to gain trust. We need to build trust. And halfway through this workshop, I'm going to give you some tools on how to build trust within your team members. If you're a leader of a team, how do you build two-way trust between you and the people that report into you? If you're in a team, how do you build trust with your colleagues around you? And I'm going to give you a couple of tools that are going to enable you to actually start building those trust levels so that you can then move on to that next point, which is having difficult conversations and making sure people feel included within teams. So I got on the judo mat and things went okay. I was naturally not very good at judo, but cutting a long story short, I dug in, I trained hard, and I got selected for Great Britain at the age of 16 to represent Great Britain in my first international, which was the European Visually Impaired Championships in Manchester in 1989. I won a bronze medal in that competition and then went on to represent Great Britain at 5 Paralympic Games, winning a bronze in Atlanta in 96 and a silver in Athens in 2004. Now, that doesn't give me the right to sit here and talk to you about teams in the workplace. Alongside my sports career, I also had a 20-year plus career in sales as an IT sales consultant. And at the top of my career, I was sales manager, UK sales manager for ASA, the Laptop People's internal sales team. And that was where I learnt my skills of delegation, feedback, leadership skills, and creating inclusive teams. And that's what we're going to talk through today. Okay. Right, so there's me as a 7-year-old. There's me on the rostrum in Athens winning that silver medal, and there's me delivering leadership workshops around the government agencies, moving forward and developing my career. So I'm a big poser of questions. I like to hear from you, okay? And what I want to hear from you in the chat box is we want to hear from you. What comes into your mind or your head when we mention the word inclusion within the workplace? Inclusion. Pop in the chat box. What comes into your head when we mention the word inclusion? It could be good or bad. It doesn't have to be the positive stuff. And I'm not saying what do you think you should be doing inclusion. It could also be, what do other managers think inclusion means? Or is there a bad bit to inclusion as well? Pop some stuff in the chat box. Tendai, I can see we've got some stuff coming through. What we got coming through there?
Fairness, everyone, empathy, together, variety, open-mindedness, belonging, no one is left out, respect, I like that one. All of us, no matter the difference, that's also another unique one. involving everyone possible,
Yeah,
celebrating our differences. I like that one as well.
me too.
Everyone feeling part of the team, consideration of anyone, no matter who they are, where they're from, all the challenges they've had in life. Caroline, thank you for that. I like that. Um,
So I'm going to jump in there, Tendai, if that's all
Absolutely.
right.
Yeah.
You know, everyone's being really nice here. You're being really nice, okay? So if inclusion is all about all those sorts of things, what stops some people doing it? Come on then, let's get really blunt with this now, okay? Let's not just tick a box, let's get blunt with it now. Come on, we've all got work to do on a daily basis, okay? Inclusion's hard, isn't it? Which is why some people struggle with this. You know, it involves extra paperwork, it involves extra conversations. Why do people not do it then? What have we got coming in there, Tendai?
Oh, I'm just catching up with them now. Laziness, can't be bothered. Lack of
Yeah.
understanding, thinking everyone looks the same. Not being able to meet face to face. Narrow-minded clicks, I like them. They're coming in droves now. Personal bias, conscious or unconscious, lack of accountability, extra planning to understand people's accessible needs. Very important, that one. Sometimes people simply forget, seen as getting in the way of getting things done quickly. Process can make it difficult. More efforts, people are not taking other people's views or beliefs. If it
Well,
doesn't affect them, it feels like a chore.
there's loads there, isn't there? And
Overall, coming
absolutely, there's
in,
a
yeah.
few that's jumped out at me
Mhm.
there. And especially for myself going into the workplace, I'm going to give you a little bit of a true story here, okay? So back in 1990, I was getting into the IT industry after a bit of a bad time, starting out at a company called Equity and Law. Those are of my age will remember that company as a pensions company. Anyway, I went into IT and I started on a call desk logging calls. And my boss turned around to me about 3 years later after we had developed and the whole team was gelling really well. And we'd got massive trust levels. And he turned around to me and he said, and I'm going to admit something to you now. When we first actually considered having you as part of the team, the initial thought that went through my head was, I've already got so much to do, and this is just going to make more paperwork having somebody in the team that's got a disability. Yeah. So there's lots and lots of stuff that comes into people's minds. I'm not saying yours, but lots and lots of biases, lots and lots of, you know, thought processes, lots and lots of stuff that get in the way of people being inclusive because it is really hard. And there's that other thing that was mentioned earlier on around valuing differences and seeing people as individuals. Now that's really important here when you're talking about inclusion, you know, and we're going to talk about equity and equality later on. But it's really important when we're looking at inclusion that we see everybody as an individual. We see everybody as somebody that's bringing something new to the party or some kind of value to the team that is individual. That's the word, isn't it? Is individual, and they're helping in some way. Tendai, anything else in the chat box that's been coming in since I've been talking?
Yes, so I've highlighted a few words that I think, because first of all, thank you everybody for sharing that. Bigotry, privilege, bias, selfishness. Averagely, that's what's been coming in there, I think, especially bigotry.
Yeah, yeah. As managers and as people, we need to be thinking about things, don't we? We need to be taking a step back, okay? And we need to be looking at those biases that we've got. We need to be looking at that sort of stuff. I know I did a lot of work with a department within what's it called? The apprenticeship. That's the words. Apprenticeship scheme within a large building company. And they have completely, and this was a few years ago now, they have completely changed the way that they employ people and ask for people to apply for jobs. They ask people to send a CV in now, which only says their name, okay, and where they live, and then the details about the person. So no age, none of that sort of stuff, you know, and they've actually seen an absolute change in the staff that they employ and the reduction in how bias takes control of what we're doing when we make those sorts of decisions about staff members, especially when they're joining a company. Because we know that things shouldn't take over. We know that we shouldn't be biased against people that because of their age, because of their race, because of their sex, because of their disability, whatever that sort of stuff is. And that sort of stuff's really important. So here we go. I'll read the slides just in case we've got some people on here that are visually impaired, the same as me. So inclusion is ensuring every team member feels valued, safe, and empowered to contribute, to move us from simply having a seat at the table to ensuring every voice is heard and leveraged for team success. Now, the way we make this into actionable things instead of just buzzwords, as I've put down there for the corporate world, we're going to look at this in a minute. We're going to look at psychological safety. And I'm going to ask you a question about psychological safety in a minute around making sure team members feel safe and feel like they can speak up and feel like, like they've been listened to, without being judged. That's the important thing, isn't it? Making sure people feel belonging in your team and authenticity when you're talking to them or they're talking to you, feeling like they can be themselves. Anyone that's ever worked for, give me a thumbs up in the chat box. If anyone's ever worked for what I would call a boss that's a table thumper, you do it my way or not at all. Yes. This is a micromanager, a table thumper, somebody give me a thumbs up in the chat box if you've ever worked for a boss like that. It's really difficult, isn't it? Really difficult. And that's really hard. We then move through to equitable access and voice. Everyone has an equal seat at the table. And that's quite difficult sometimes, isn't it? So there are certain situations where there has to be a leader. But the leader must also think, right, I've got my listening ears on at this point, okay, before I engage my voice and give my opinion, so you're making sure that people are heard before, okay, the other things come. And then when you're in a meeting, for instance, and somebody's giving an opinion on, can we do this way? Or, hi, I've got an idea on how we do this, how we put this particular spreadsheet together. Can I share it? Yes, of course you can. Listen and then discuss and then make a decision potentially offline without everyone there in that particular meeting. All sorts of things there. Little story now around people that I've spoken to in the past. So I do a lot of disability awareness and inclusion workshops around a lot of government agencies, and also some police forces as well. And there are people within these workshops that I've listened to, for instance, that live with ADHD and dyslexia and autism and things of that, conditions of that sort of nature. And they have been in spaces where their bosses have created psychologically safe spaces and inclusive spaces, and they've been able to come up and say, right, this spreadsheet that you've just given to me is extremely complicated. How about doing it this way? And this was the person that lives with ADHD saying that. And the boss has turned around, looked at it and said, what a brilliant idea. Shared it with the team, and the team have said, why haven't we been doing it this way all the time? Please change. So there's just one example of if you've got somebody in your team that has a condition like ADHD, dyslexia or something like that, listening to what their suggestions are may well improve the dynamics of the team and the ways that you work. So really important that we look at that sort of stuff. And then value, that last one at the end there, a person's unique insights and problem-solving approaches are actively sought out. Here's a challenge to you, because in my experience within the civil service, one of the biggest areas that people need to work on within the civil service through people surveys that I've seen is feeling valued in the workplace. When was the last time either you as a manager had a conversation with your staff to say, this is what you bring to the team, not you're the best thing since sliced bread and we couldn't do this without you, because we know that everybody is replaceable, yes? But when did you have a conversation about the value they bring? Or if you're not a manager, When was the last conversation you had with your manager about the value that they bring to you as a manager and vice versa? Tendo, I can see some comments going in the chat box there. Have we got anything interesting in there?
Yeah, I was actually writing. There's a couple of things I probably would like you to address. And Angie put something around gradism, sexism, and cliques. And cliques has occurred a couple of times now, has reappeared a couple of times. So I don't know if you can address that. Then I'll share one other thing for you to think of as well. There is, so the majority of employees stay silent, avoiding conflict. Standing up for themselves will bring too much attention and will create a hostile work environment. I became a psychopath after being bullied for being neurodivergent. This is from Monica. I thought that is something that we can address, because I know that a few people usually feel that way. That's the reason why we don't stand up, because you don't want that conflict avoidance. So those three things I think they've been repetitive: cliques, gradism, sexism, and how to tackle the conflict.
Yeah, agree, and that's a brilliant subject to have and thank you for everyone that's mentioned that, and Monica as well. Thank you for sharing and feeling safe to be able to share. Firstly, in my opinion, okay, we know that without it goes under the radar, doesn't it? There is still a bit of sexism and ageism going on in the workplace. It shouldn't. Okay, it absolutely shouldn't. I've been brought up and I managed with what my mum and dad taught me, and that was, okay, if you put the right person in the right place with the right reasonable adjustments, then they can shine. Yes. So it doesn't matter if someone's 54 or 24, and they might be going into a job like, for instance, with AI in the background, for instance. And I'm going to be frank, as a 54-year-old, I'm struggling with AI, but it doesn't mean, okay, that I can't do it. Yes. So, we need to make sure that we're not looking at that ageism and sexism, just making sure we've got the right people in the right job with the right reasonable adjustments. And that is imperative. Okay. When it comes to cliques, we all know it goes on. Okay, we all know it goes on. We all know that people click, they talk behind people's backs and all that sort of stuff. Again, we need to sort of stamp that sort of stuff out. Now, that goes on within government agencies, that goes on in the corporate world, that goes on in police forces, that goes on everywhere. Unfortunately, it's common. Okay, now, when I did some work with a pretty major police force a while ago, 2 or 3 years ago, they have a saying which is a behavior walked past is a behavior endorsed. Okay, but it is really difficult to stamp this behavior out without sort of being labeled, isn't it? Why I don't want that label of, oh, they're always in it to cause trouble, or Ian's always whinging about disability or inclusion in the workplace. It's because he's got a disability, but there's ways of doing it. There's ways of talking to your manager. There's ways of, having a polite coaching conversation. Anyone that's not been involved in having a coaching and being trained on how to have a coaching conversation, have a look into that and how to ask coaching questions in the right way, okay, to discuss points that are particularly difficult, okay, to get your point across. You don't have to, have conflict with somebody to get a point across. You can do it in a coaching way, okay? And that, for me, as somebody that doesn't like conflict, is the way that I do it. So I had to give some feedback to a facilitator that I was training on behalf of another company, and quite frankly, it was a facilitator that shouldn't really be facilitating, that just didn't have the skills at that time to do it. Okay, but my job was not to ruin her dreams. My job was to support her through. Okay, and initially I started with my feedback, which was, right, well, you didn't do this, and you should have done that, and you did, and we ended up in not having an argument, but being in tears. Okay, I then changed my tact. And after the next day, when she was facilitating, I turned around and said, how did that go then? What do you think about that? Where do you think you could have improved? What could you have done? And absolutely every question and issue that I was going to bring up, she answered herself. Okay. So think, if you have something that's going on, how can you approach it in a way with your manager that's not seen as conflict, but seen as my dad used to say, don't come to me with a problem, come to me with a solution. Okay. How can you go to your manager and present a solution rather than a problem that's going on? We shouldn't have to go about it that way, but if we do suffer and struggle with conflict, then that might be a way for you that works. It definitely works for me. Tendai, did that help out in the chat box there?
Yes, it did. Funny enough, I was going through the chats again. There's another one that also piqued my interest, and I think people want to know about this. So this is from Mark. How do you think ability to oil the wheels of inclusiveness differs between those who have faced difficulty being included and those who are perceived as being someone who falls asleep bang in the middle of the white working heterosexual male in the 40s who is entirely well-meaning and does all they can to promote inclusivity?
Whoa.
I'll repeat that again. All right.
Yeah, that's a big question, that one.
That's a big,
who
absolutely.
said
How that was Mark Grimes. So
that?
how do you think? Yeah.
I was going to. Actually, go ahead, Mark. Tendai, sorry.
Sorry, I was going to say, how do you? So Mark say, how do you think ability to oil the wheels of inclusiveness differs between those who have faced difficulty being included and those who are perceived as being someone who falls asleep bang in the middle of the white working heterosexual male in their 40s who is entirely well-meaning and does all they can to promote inclusivity?
Great question. So for me, and we're going to talk about this, and that was Mark, was it? So thank you for
That
the
was
question,
Mark, yeah.
Mark. Mark, thank you for the question. I'm going to say, Mark, right, first of all, this is not an easy answer, an easy question to answer, okay? Because if it was easy to answer, then the question, then we wouldn't be having this conversation about inclusiveness after hundreds of years of trying to fix this problem, okay? For me, everything starts with trust and a little bit of confidence, okay? So having the confidence to be able to speak up, but managers and teams, and team leaders creating the environment where trust is at the initial footings, okay? So creating that great, really steady and stable footing and foundation of trust so that when things are needing to be said about inclusion, the people can come to you and say, right, this is going on, what should we do about it, okay? But yes, there are people out there that really are not inclusive, okay? But there are also people out there that are trying to bang their head against the brick wall to be so inclusive, it's unbelievable. I suppose what we really need is for, if everyone on this call can take away one little thing from this workshop, that is, if you can be an advocate for inclusion, okay, just by having conversations with your teams when you go back to your workplace, rather than somebody that is the disruptor and banging the drum all of the time, that is better than we've got now. Yes? So it takes small steps, but I think it probably starts with trust and building a bit of confidence. Tendai, should we move on?
I think so, because I'm just conscious we've got a lot to share. Yeah.
But they're great questions, everyone. Thank you very much. Thank you. So next question here then. How do we create these inclusive environments, that we work in? What do we need to do to make sure that we're creating these inclusive environments? Pop some stuff in the chat box for me, please. What would you do as a team manager, or do you do as a team manager to make sure your team or your future team is going to be inclusive to the best ability? Pop some stuff in the chat box for me there.
Creating a safe space to open up. That's one that's came in.
And that's not just a physical safe space where you go into a room and have a chat. No, that's needed as well. There are a lot of departments that I know that have, for instance, they don't have rooms where you can go and chat. They don't have a specific room. There's a lot of places around that don't have that. But you're also looking at physical space, but also that mental space where somebody can say, can we have a chat about this? Without the fear of the recrimination, the fear of the comeback from the manager. Tendai, please carry on, sorry.
So I'll rule out a few so that at least we try and get for everybody. So role modeling behavior, understand that we can never be the same equality, diversity, and anti-bullying policies. I like that. Making these conversations BAU and not one-offs. Ensuring training is available to all team members. Get them relaxed first, which is, I think, very important. We were talking about this earlier about us relaxing. Encourage open conversation when we can agree to try not to be offensive and try not to be offended in order to discuss difficult subjects safely.
Yeah, like that. Discussing difficult subjects safely without offending people is one of the most difficult things you can do in the workplace, isn't it? How do you give somebody feedback on their performance when they think their performance is brilliant? You know, so having those difficult conversations, you know, we're coming back to psychological safety, we're coming back to trust, we're coming back to all that sort of stuff. Yes, we need that physical space. Yes, we need that head space to be able to do that. Yes, we need to be able to have those difficult conversations. Yes, we need to consider people as individuals within our teams. But how do we do that? Let me give you some suggestions. Okay, so here we go. So here's just 4 of stuff that I've heard a lot around the civil service and a lot around in corporates. Planning inclusive social events. Quick story around that, okay? So I run the local judo club here at our local school, okay? And I'm also in charge of, you know, when I'm running this judo, I very quickly realized that a judo club or a sports club is not just a place where people come to train. It's also a social gathering and a community. So I thought, right, what does everyone like? And I put a little poll out and it came back that everyone loved a curry. Okay, so I organised a little WhatsApp group. It was called We Love Judo and Curry. And it was for the parents, not the kids, obviously, it was for the parents. So I started organising Friday night curry nights once every 3 months. And I started looking at who was turning up. And the same people were turning up every time for every curry night I was organising. Now, I thought I was the most inclusive person that I could be. Okay, so I went around asking people that weren't coming, why are you not coming to the curry nights? And some of the people said, we don't like curry. But the majority of the people said, we can't do Friday nights because we've got kids. And because my kids have grown up, I completely forgot that, you know, that was going on. So now what I've done is I've rotated between Saturdays and Fridays and at different times and in different places, and I get more people coming out. So when you're planning these social events or even your team away days, for instance, choose different spaces that are closer to some people once and some people the other, you know, but making sure that everyone can get there, and also I'm going to pose a question in a moment, and making sure that everyone feels included and as if they can be themselves when they get to the event. That's really important, isn't it? Offer team conversations. We've talked about on that one. Your next team away day may well include, I don't know, even half an hour on talking about disability and inclusion and diversity. You know, how do we create these teams? Why is it important we create these teams? Some of you on this call may well be responsible for creating policy for government, for instance. You know, if you had a diverse team that included people that had disabilities, people from certain religions, people of a certain age, people of, you know, all sorts of different sexual orientation, you'll be able to develop your policies from a position of experience, not just, oh, I think, or I've been told. You know, that's really important that we look at that side of things as well, isn't it? I've also got down here, challenge discriminatory behaviour. We've talked about that. You know, a behaviour walked past is a behaviour endorsed. And lead by example. Somebody mentioned that earlier on, didn't they? Yeah, absolutely. You know, if we as leaders or we as people that are coming on these workshops to talk about inclusion don't do it ourselves, then people are not going to follow us, are they? They're not going to follow us down the road of inclusivity and saying, right, let's change our place. So I think from my point of view, if I had one dream and ask of you following this workshop, it would be that little change maker in your area that does something like this to actually make your team or bring your team along, even if you're not the manager, to be a little bit more inclusive and a little bit more empathetic when it comes to people that may be different, may live with a disability, may, not conform to, as I think Mark was saying, a stereotypical type of person or whatever it is, just really making sure that we're looking at everyone as an individual and never, here's the point as well, never assuming we know what somebody needs or wants. Always ask. Really important that.
There's another one for you, Ian, that I thought, excuse me, there's two actually. I'm not saying that the other ones are not important, but there's two stand out because one, staff network groups. I always found that they're very helpful in most workplaces. And then the second one was around understanding the dynamics of extroverts and introverts and how they manage social situations.
Yes, absolutely. And Tendai, thank you. Yeah, thank you for saying that, because that's really important, isn't it? Staff networks is one. I'm going to go back to that quickly because, again, your own particular department will probably have a disability network. They'll probably have a neurodiversity network. They'll probably have all sorts of other networks, okay? These networks, because, again, it's another piece of work that I do with another government agency where they're asking for people to join these networks, not because they live with the condition or are part of that community. They just need people to support them and spread the word. Okay, really important. And that second point, Tendai, that you mentioned, what was that?
So let me just go back to it again. Apologies. So ask everyone in the team if they have something about, no, that's the wrong one. Understanding the dynamics of extroverts and introverts and how they manage social situations.
That's the one. That's it. Absolutely. You will have in your team, you'll have two types of different people. You'll have the ones that are extrovert and love talking and they'll share their point on everything. Believe it or not, that's not me. Believe it or not, when I'm not running a workshop, I'm actually an introvert. Okay. So yeah, absolutely. I would sit there and Tendai, sorry, you're right. Okay, so I would sit there. So making sure that in your workshops you are catering for all, really important. I can see the chat box going wild there, Tendai. Is there anything coming through there?
Yeah, I think, apologies everybody heard me, because I think I'm going through all of them. So Richard just said, Ian, please, could you talk a little more on your point around how to have a conversation with someone who thinks their performance is brilliant? It easily leads to a belief that there's a lack of trust, psychological safety if you try and address it. So that's the first one. The second one that I want to do
let's before we move on, Tendai, let's approach that one because it's a really and that was Richard, was it?
That was Richard, yeah.
Richard, that's a massive subject. I can run workshops on that for probably 2 or 3 hours, okay? But it all comes down to one particular point. Somebody in front of you that's not performing well, that thinks they are, is in what I would call denial, okay? And the way the feedback is given to that person is extremely important. When somebody is in denial when it comes to performance, it needs to be backed up with evidence, but the evidence needs to be presented to the person in a way that's non-confrontational. So it needs to be a coaching conversation that starts with the, how do you feel like, it sounds very soft, doesn't it? Yeah. But it needs to start with the conversation like, how are things going? What do you think how do you think things are going at the minute? What do you think, where do you think your strengths are? Where are your weaknesses? Where do you think you can improve? Okay, when you get to that right point there. But if you go straight in and say, you're not doing very well, I need you to buck your ideas up after that conversation we had last week, you're instantly going to go into conflict and nothing's going to get done. So ultimately, if one person is in an emotional state when you're giving feedback and when you're having a conversation like that, then absolutely, it's really difficult to create meaningful correct decisions on moving forward and how to help each other. Okay, so it needs to be what I call the 4S framework. You start with the state of mind. Are you both in a good state? You then move into safely starting a conversation. You then move to surfacing the issue, and then at the end of it, sharing next steps forward. Okay, Richard, that's a massive subject, but it all comes down to that starting it the right way and giving the feedback with specifics based around facts and having a coaching conversation. Tendai.
So this is from Angela. There are also ambiverts who fluctuate between both inversion and extroversion. So they may not show up the same every day.
Yeah, oh, bang on, absolutely, and also that's a great point, and also somebody that that turns up, and this could be down to somebody that turns up in the morning, and it's not about coffee and caffeine and stuff. It's just about a person, isn't it? They might turn up in the morning and be they're like the life and soul of the office and the team, and they're like, whoa, come on, let's do this. And by the time it gets to half 12, 1 o'clock, they're like, leave me alone. And there are people out there that do that, and sometimes it is specifically down to that's just their personality. That's just the way they are. And quite frankly, as a manager, if you are a manager, it's your job to know your team by having conversations to make them feel safe, psychologically safe, and so they can trust you, okay, to support them in the times when they need you, and actually that you'll do the right thing and they'll do the right thing for you. But actually there are people out there that are absolutely like that. Sometimes it's down to conditions like disabilities, for instance, like PTSD and all sorts of other things as well. But actually sometimes it's just personality based. Tendo, I think we need to move on.
I know one last one for you, because I think
last one.
This one is a bit unique to other questions. How do you address imposter syndrome? And this is from Angie. Unless I'm wrong, Angie, but how do you address imposter syndrome?
Oh, now massive question that, isn't it? Imposter syndrome. And anyone that's ever been in that situation will know how crushing it is sometimes, okay? So I'm going to give you, and I'm being vulnerable now, everybody. I'm being vulnerable, okay? I joined as an associate working for a consultancy a while ago, and this was back in 2017. And I was asked to join by a sporting friend of mine that I knew from the Olympic days. And I got into this room with all these other people, and they were talking around books that they'd read by Stephen Covey and other books that they'd read by other people. And we're going to mention Amy Edmondson in a minute about psychological safety. And I was sat there thinking, I know nothing about this stuff. Yeah, I know nothing about this stuff. I come out of school at the age of 16 with 3 GCSEs at C level. Yeah. I struggle to read books. I listen to books on an audio, like Audible and stuff like that. And there's these people that are absolutely they got masters, they got degrees and all that sort of stuff. And I got 3 GCSEs. And I turned around to somebody that I'd created a little relationship, a bit of rapport with on my first half day when I was there. I wasn't full time. It was a day's training. And I turned around to this guy called Keith and I said, Keith, what am I doing here? I have no idea what I'm doing here. I don't know half as much as these people. What am I doing here? And he turned around to me, and this completely got rid of my imposter syndrome straight away. And he reminded me that they chose me. They asked me to be there. Okay. And as soon as he reminded me that they gave me the job, yeah, the imposter syndrome sort of got a little bit easier to deal with. You'll still suffer, you'll still have that imposter syndrome a little bit, but you learn to live with it. But keep reminding yourself, Angie, if it's Angie, I think it's Angie, that wherever you are now, you got there because somebody saw something in you, okay, in the position you are now, where you can shine, okay, and just go prove them right, yeah? So that's really the way I coped with it. Okay, Tendo?
Yes, we can move on now. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. So for me, again, I've been talking about this word trust for quite a while. And some of the people on here may have heard of the trust equation, okay? If you've been on other training courses, leadership training courses and management training courses, you'll have heard of this trust equation, which is around creativity, the other word is... reliability, that's the word, sorry, it slipped my mind. Creativity, reliability, and rapport. If you build those 3 things, then trust levels tend to go up between you and the person you're building trust with. But if you have too much self-interest, so everything you do is for your benefit, not theirs, and all you're doing is talking about what you can get out of it, not them, then trust tends to reduce. I tend to simplify that a little bit, which is my piggy bank of trust. If you imagine you've got a Perspex piggy bank in front of you for every person you work with or every person you're with, and the more full up your Perspex piggy bank of trust is with coins, the more trust levels you have with that person in a two-way. And the way you put a coin into that piggy bank is by having a conversation with a person, and the only person that benefits from that conversation is the other person, not you. Okay, so if you're giving feedback, it's completely for their benefit. If you're having a conversation, it's completely to support or help them, nothing to do with what you're getting out of it. You're then building rapport to a massive level, and then you have to work on the credibility on how they see you and doing things that you say you're going to do. Okay, so trust level is really important. But what we're looking at here then that leads into is psychological safety. So how do we build that? Just a couple of minutes, pop in the chat box. How do we build psychological safety in the workplace, in your team? Pop it in the chat box for us, please.
Create a safe space for challenge. Thank you, Caroline. Gabrielle, not just listening, acting.
Yes, not just listening. Do what you'll say you're going to do, because it's very hard to build trust, but very easy in one fell swoop if you don't follow through on certain things that are really important to reduce or even destroy the trust that you've built up with people. Tendai, anything else?
Yeah, being able to be yourself at work. I think that's a very interesting one as well. Walk the talk. For me, it's about following through with the things you say you will do, not assuming about other people's data, and in trust. Encourage conversations. Recognize workplace issues and apply action plan. I like that one. Remove the feeling of being judged. I think that's also another one that people struggle with. Being transparent, ensuring that employees are supported to improve themselves.
Can I stop you there? Can I jump in there, Tendai, if that's all right? Because I'm interested in that one about being transparent, especially as a manager. Sometimes as a manager, we can't pass information on, can we? Sometimes anyone that's been or is a manager or has been a manager in the past, there's some things that we can't share with our staff members because we're asked by our managers not to share at this point, but this is something we're working on. This is an idea we've had, yeah? It's okay to be transparent about there's things going on that I can't talk about at the moment, but I'll let you know as soon as I can, okay? And that's still being transparent, isn't it? Okay, but then obviously there are people then there, especially, there's certain situations where you say that, you know, if you're talking about redundancy for staff people, for in particular, for instance, you can't say, oh yes, redundancies are being talked about, but I can't talk to you about it in a minute. Some people will absolutely panic at that, wouldn't they? Yeah. So there are certain situations that you need as a manager to use your leadership skills to make a call on what you can and can't do. Tendai, anything else coming through?
This one actually is interesting. It's I am who I am at work, at home, and anywhere else because I'm a terrible liar. I hope that means people get the authentic me.
So I say that one again, sorry.
So I'll repeat that again. I am who I am at work, at home, and anywhere else because I'm a terrible liar. I hope that means people get the authentic me.
I've got that. That's brilliant. And yes, brilliant. Absolutely never change. You know, lies are the beginning of the end. Never do it. Always be your authentic self, because do you know what? People can see through it, can't they?
Yes.
You know, people can see through it. I'm going to move on, Tendai, if that's all right, because we've got this thing. So psychological safety, coined by a Harvard professor, Amy Edmondson. A lot of people have probably heard this before around, you know, enabling that space so that people have got a voice, people can make mistakes. Actually, I've just been, we talked about a book earlier on, didn't we, Tendai? But I've actually just finished writing the text to a team building book that I'm putting together. And it was all, and part of it was around setting up environments where people feel like they can fail fast and learn fast, you know, without the fear of the feedback, you know. So because people will get things wrong, but it's really important that we create that space that if they get it wrong once, giving them the ability to say, right, I got this wrong. This is why I got it wrong. Okay, is this right? How would I do this next time? Or this is what I think I should have done. Okay. So really having that ability to, as a manager, to set those teams up, to give people that space to talk, to share, but also to feel like if they do make a mistake, they don't become embarrassed and they don't fear the reaction from you, the manager, or people around them. So the definition, psychological safety, as it says down there, safe to speak up, ask questions, and admit mistakes. Why it matters, boosts team effort, effectiveness, innovation, and learning. Absolutely. And your job as a manager, if you are a manager, is to encourage open dialogue, feedback, and participation. Absolutely. So really but this is difficult as a manager, isn't it? I wouldn't say, this is not easy. And this is why not everybody wants to be a manager. There are some people, including my wife, that just wants to be the best person that she can be in the position that she's in. Okay. So, there is no particular hard and fast rule on being a manager means you do this, because you know what? We're dealing with people and everybody is different. Anything to mention there, Tendai, before I move on?
No, I think we move on now. Yeah.
Cool. So have a quick read of this, everybody. In fact, for those people that are visually impaired, I'll read it out. And what I want you to do, and we're going to put a poll up on the screen in a minute. So Debs is going to put a poll up. Over the years, I've attended countless meetings booked in buildings without lift accessible toilets or room layouts where I could even see or hear the presenter. Despite submitting my requirements time after time or every time. I'm now starting to feel that my manager and the people around me are just saying the right thing to tick a box. Now you can see around the discrimination there that direct discrimination is around, somebody's losing out because of their disability. They're specifically losing out because of the disability and they're being discriminated against because of their disability or their age, their sex or their ethnicity or whatever it is, their protected characteristic. Or indirect discrimination is potentially a policy or a way of working that a company's brought in. And it helps the majority, but inadvertently excludes a minority. And we all probably can put our finger on some policies that have been happening in our own particular areas where that has happened. So can we pop the poll up on the screen if that's all right for us? And we're going to ask you to vote, okay, and submit your vote on this. What do you think that team member struggled with or encountered or experienced when it comes to direct or indirect discrimination? There is no right or wrong answer. There's just your answer. Then press that submit button.
It's neck and neck at the moment.
Oh, it is, isn't it?
Mm.
Well, let's see. Let's 50%. Let's make sure. Just give it another 30 seconds to make sure everyone has voted. Okay.
Absolutely.
So we're around, oh, look at that, 50-50. I can't see how many people have voted though. Oh, there we go, down the bottom. 32 responses, 16 each, neck and neck. And absolutely, that actually mirrors exactly the response that I get. Hey. So it's increasing still. Oh,
62 responses so far. So 53-47. It looks like it's finalized that.
Wow, look at that. Right, so almost there when it comes to neck and neck. And that mirrors responses that I get in workshops when I ask exactly this question, okay, around direct and indirect discrimination. It's not an easy thing to work with. Now, when you do experience one of your staff members or you being discriminated against, okay, you can only take advice. Okay, you can only go to the right people at the right time to give you that advice. It can be HR, it could be a particular, as Tendai said earlier on, a particular agency network that has experience in this. It could be all sorts of occupational therapists or occupational health. It could be, like I said, HR and people of that sort of nature. But you need to take advice. Okay. We're not expecting you as managers to be expert in all of these things, but what we are hoping you to do is recognize when this stuff does go on, you need to find places to signpost both yourself to and the person being discriminated against to, okay? And then take advice on your own particular department's policies on how to handle discrimination. So, discrimination happens, but how do we stop it? Pop some stuff in the chat box for me, please. How would we stop discrimination happening in your area? What ideas do you have to stop discrimination happening, especially when it comes to this particular scenario here? When you're organising a team meeting, how would you make sure that this team member felt not discriminated against? What would you do to put stuff in place? Give us some stuff in the chat box if you can, please.
So to answer some, Angie, when colleagues are humiliated in front of others, I always speak up. That's very nice.
Yeah.
Evanthia, we've got inclusive design, universal design. Angela, call it in before calling it out. I like that. Proper education for our line managers, supported by policies, practices that are well communicated to all. Ensure that all team members' access needs are considered at the planning stage. That's true. Be brave enough to challenge. Consider everyone's needs. Some people need more support, mandatory training, upskilling sessions, providing a space for people to self-reflect and existing practice. Will be valuable to discuss age discrimination, as I feel this area is often overlooked and not given the attention it deserves. Thank you, Andrea. Ask people if there's anything that they need, anything changed. Okay, ask people if there's anything that they need changed.
Yeah.
Ultimately, the bigger picture requires a cultural change, and that requires positive, appropriate policy behaviors.
I've got a screen that's been added in just here. Oh, there we go. It's been taken off. Thank you. Yeah. So there's a load of different comments coming through there, Tendai, which all make absolute sense. But I think there's a big thread coming through here that more training in this area, Tendai, is needed. Would you agree?
I agree. Ian, I do agree. That's the majority of the consensus from the start.
Yeah, and absolutely consensus. But we've seen this, and we've been talking inclusion for decades, everybody. Okay, training is one thing, but you got to put it into action. You got to put it into action. Here's a couple of things that I've picked up around organising meetings to make sure they're inclusive when I've been talking to people. And this is a suggestion that I made because I used to use this. When you're sending out an invitation to an event, if there's food involved, a common question is, what special dietary requirements do you have? And you expect an answer if somebody's got a nut allergy or glucose or vegetarian or whatever. Why don't we put on the bottom of our meeting invites, as an employee, how can we make sure you get the best out of this event? Please tell us what you need. And you give that question to everybody. It then doesn't make one particular or two particular people feel like they're being singled out because they've got a protected characteristic, okay, and you know about it. It asks everybody. And what's happened in the past, the people have made comments to me that saying, I didn't realize that this person was afraid of heights, so didn't want to sit by the window. Or I didn't realize this person was slightly deaf in one ear, so they had to sit on the left-hand side of the room, or I didn't realize this. So really using that question cuts out and brings in anonymity so that people don't feel like that everyone then starts knowing about what their disability or their protected characteristic is. And it also means that you as a manager, when you start managing a team, or if you are, you start learning things about people that you potentially didn't know before. And also, I've also heard when organising meetings that are particularly hybrid, so let's say you've got 15 people in a conference room and 15 people dialed in, there's a practice going on now where everybody on the call, including all 15 in the conference room, all have their laptops open and they're all looking at their cameras on their laptops, even though they're all physically in the same space, okay? And then you need to work out, obviously, the mics and stuff like that there. But I'm hearing from a lot of people that is absolutely making sure the people are dialing in from virtual feel like they're included and listened to. So that could be an important point to use as well there. Right, last question. What is the difference between equality and equity? Pop that in the chat box for me, please. What is the difference between equality and equity? Now, this is a question that we all are thinking about.
Daksha mystery outcomes.
Say that again.
So Daksha said outcomes.
Outcomes, yes, could be. Absolutely.
Adoni, equity equals fair for everyone. Equality equals the same for all. One is treating everyone the same. One is treating everyone according to their needs. Equity, listening to individual needs. That was from Sir Stewart. Thank you, Stuart. Yeah. Equity is making sure we treat people fairly, not the same. Equality is treating everyone equally. Equity is tailored to the individual. Equality providing the same thing for everyone. Equity providing what each person needs.
Tendai, thank you.
You're
Absolutely. Welcome. Yes, here we go. And this is, again, that conversation. For me, equality was a buzzword. We even had a policy written about it, the Equality Act, wasn't it? And policies were brought in that you think, oh, I'll bring a big policy in to try and help all blind people, you know, cross a road or do this or do that. But actually, there were certain blind people that couldn't do that because their condition meant that it wasn't possible. Okay, so very quickly, you know, companies have realised that actually we're dealing with people. When dealing with people, everybody's different. So we need to start looking at the equity side of things, making sure that people have got the resources that they need individually to shine. Getting back to that point, if the right person is in the right job with the right reasonable adjustments, if needed, then they can shine. Yeah, that's equity, isn't it? Making sure that each person's got the resources they need to do the job they are doing so that they can be the best that they can be. Okay, and that for me is really important. So, tips to take away. Okay, for me, it all starts with that trust thing, but we're going to move on to that sort of stuff in a minute. As it says down there, spend time to build trust and enable psychological safety. Starts there for me, that trust equation or trust piggy bank. Once you get trust, conversations become a little bit easier. Consider all in the team when implementing policy and be equitable, okay? Don't just use equality, okay? Be equitable, okay? And then, like I say down there, there's a couple of things there that you can read far faster than I can, and I believe you're going to get a copy of these slides or look at this afterwards anyway. So there are a few things there, and hopefully that's been interesting for you, and hopefully you've taken something from that. But I'm now going to come back to Tendai and let you close the workshop, Tendai, if that's all right.
Thank you so much, Ian. Thank you, very insightful. Absolutely appreciated, Marcel.
Thank you. Well, don't leave just yet.
Thank you, everybody. If we can you just use our phone to scan our QR code to give Ian some feedback and for feedback for us as well. Wanted to just make you aware that we will be sharing the recording with you in the next 72 hours. So please just bear with us. And if there's any questions you wanted us to try and answer if we haven't got to them, please just send me an email and I'll try and get Ian to also look at those. But round of applause for Ian, please, if we can, in the virtual round of applause. And let's try and hydrate and enjoy the rest of our day. Thank you.